20 years without a woman, the cowboy thought he'd die alone until one morning she came to his door. The cowboy had been living alone for as long as he could remember. His home was a small, weathered ranch tucked away in the wide-open plains. The wind swept through the tall grass, and the sun painted golden streaks across the horizon every morning, but no one ever shared those moments with him. He had become part of the land itself, as if the wide skies, the dusty trails, and the distant mountains were the only companions he would ever need. Every morning he woke before the sun. He would rise from his old wooden bed, the mattress lumpy from years of use, and stretch his stiff muscles. His joints ached sometimes, a reminder of the years he had spent working under the unforgiving sun. Still, he moved with purpose. He was a man of habit, a man who had learned to survive on his own. There were cows to feed, fences to repair, and 1,000 little chores that kept his hands busy and his mind from wandering too far into loneliness. He would start the day in the small kitchen, pouring black coffee into a chipped mug that had seen better days. He never added sugar or cream. He liked it bitter, as life had often been for him. He would eat a simple breakfast of eggs and bread, sometimes with bacon if he had hunted enough to spare. The silence of the house was deafening, yet he had grown accustomed to it. He spoke to no one, except for the occasional greeting to a passing neighbor or a nod to someone riding through the trails. For 20 years, this had been his life. Memories of the past sometimes crept into his mind. He remembered laughter that once filled his home, voices that spoke his name with love, and hands that had held his in comfort. But those days were gone. Life had taken them from him, one way or another. He had loved deeply once, and the pain of loss had carved a hollow space in his heart. At first, the loneliness had been unbearable, but over time he had learned to live with it, to accept it as a part of who he had become. Despite this acceptance, he sometimes wondered what it would have been like if things had been different. He would walk along the dirt paths near the river, the sound of flowing water soothing his thoughts, and imagine a life where someone waited for him in the evening. But these were just thoughts, fleeting and impossible to hold. The ranch remained quiet, the wind whispering through the trees as if sharing secrets only it could understand. The cowboy's routine was precise. After breakfast, he would check on the horses, brushing their coats until they shone in the morning light. They were his companions, silent and loyal, never asking for more than food, water, and care. He knew their moods, their habits, and their quirks. There was a comfort in their predictable behavior, a reminder that life, even in its simplicity, had patterns that could be relied upon. After tending the horses, he would walk to the barn, where he kept tools and supplies for the ranch. Repairs were a constant part of life here. Fences wore down under the sun and wind, gates loosened on their hinges, and sometimes a roof would leak after a heavy rain. He fixed everything himself, not because he had to, but because it kept him grounded. The work was hard, but it was honest. And after a long day, there was satisfaction in seeing the land cared for, even if no one else would ever notice. The evenings were the hardest. After the chores were done and the sun began its slow descent behind the hills, the quiet returned, heavier than before. He would sit on the porch, rocking gently in his chair, and watch the sky change colors. Orange, pink, and deep purple spread across the horizon, and for a moment he felt connected to something larger than himself. But then the darkness would settle, and with it, the silence that had become his constant companion. He sometimes thought of the people he had known long ago. Friends who had moved on, family who had grown distant, and the woman he had loved once and lost. He remembered her laughter, her smile, and the way her eyes could light up even the darkest room. For a long time he had hoped life would bring her back, but hope faded with the years. 20 years had passed, and he had grown used to living without companionship. He had built walls around his heart, convincing himself that love was something for other people, not for a man like him. Yet, despite the years of solitude, he never stopped feeling the ache of emptiness. There were nights when he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind, and wondering if anyone would ever come to share his life again. The thought frightened him, but it also stirred something deep inside, a small, persistent spark of longing that refused to be extinguished. On some mornings, he would take a walk down to the river that ran along the edge of his land. The water was clear and cold, and he liked to watch the fish darting beneath the surface. He would skip stones across the river, counting each skip as a small victory, as if challenging the years of loneliness that had defined him. The river reminded him that life moved on, that change was possible, and that even in solitude there could be moments of beauty. He had learned to be self-sufficient, to find joy in the little things. A well-cooked meal, the warmth of the fire in the evening, the sight of a hawk soaring overhead, these were the moments that filled his days with meaning. He had also learned patience, the kind that comes from waiting for something that may never arrive. He had waited for love, for companionship, and for the chance to share his life with someone. And though he had long given up hope, he still carried that quiet yearning in his heart. His home, though simple, reflected the life he had built. Furniture was worn but sturdy, walls decorated with photographs of his past, and shelves lined with books and trinkets collected over the years. Each item had a story, a memory attached to it, and in this way he kept the presence of loved ones alive in his home. Even in silence, he felt surrounded by fragments of a life that had been full once, a life that had shaped the man he had become. He often talked to himself, though not out loud. Thoughts, reflections, and silent conversations filled the emptiness, a way to keep his mind active and his heart from sinking too far into loneliness. Sometimes he spoke to the horses, calling their names softly as he worked. It was not the same as human conversation, but it was enough to remind him that life, even solitary life, was not completely silent. Even with all his routines, the cowboy knew the years had changed him. His hair had turned silver, his skin was weathered from sun and wind, and his hands bore the marks of hard work. The body that had once been strong and unyielding now protested with every movement. And yet there was a quiet strength in him, a resilience forged over decades of living alone and facing the challenges of the land. He had learned that survival was not just about food and shelter, but about enduring the storms of life with courage and dignity. As another evening approached, he settled into his chair on the porch, looking out over the rolling hills. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the land. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the scent of earth, pine, and distant rain. He took a deep breath, savoring the moment, and let his thoughts drift. For all the years he had spent alone, he had never truly given up on the possibility that life could still hold surprises. He had lived with the quiet hope that something or someone might come to change everything. And so, as the stars began to appear one by one in the vast night sky, the cowboy sat in the gentle silence of his home. The years of solitude had taught him patience, resilience, and self-reliance. But deep inside there remained a spark, a quiet longing that had never fully faded. He did not know what the future held or if he would ever find the companionship he had once lost. Yet he continued to live, to tend his land, and to care for the life he had built. For now the ranch was his world, the horses his companions, and the sky his witness. And in the stillness of that lonely night, the cowboy allowed himself a small, private hope. That life, even after 20 years of solitude, might still hold something extraordinary, something unexpected. Something that could change everything. It was another quiet morning on the ranch. The cowboy had already completed his early chores, feeding the horses and checking the fences, when he noticed something unusual in the distance. A figure was walking along the dusty trail that led to his home. At first, he thought it might be a traveler passing through, which was rare in these parts. But as the figure drew closer, he realized it was a woman, a stranger, approaching his door without hesitation. The cowboy felt a strange mix of surprise and caution. For 20 years, no one had come to his home uninvited. The silence he had grown used to would not allow for such unexpected appearances. His heart beat faster than usual, not from fear, but from a long-forgotten curiosity he hadn't felt in decades. Who was she? And why had she come all this way to his solitary home? The woman was neither young nor old, but she carried herself with a quiet confidence that immediately caught his attention. She wore simple clothes, a modest dress and sturdy boots, and a wide-brimmed hat shaded her face from the sun. Her hair peeked out from under the hat in soft waves, and her eyes, though cautious, sparkled with warmth. There was something familiar about her, though he could not place it. It was not a face from his past, at least not one he remembered clearly. The cowboy paused, leaning against the wooden doorframe of his porch. He had been alone for so long that the very idea of a visitor unsettled him. For a moment, he considered retreating into the house, shutting the door, and pretending no one was there. But something in the way she walked, her steady steps and calm presence made him hesitate. There was no malice in her demeanor, only purpose. "Good morning, sir," she said politely, her voice soft but clear. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." The cowboy cleared his throat. "No, you're not disturbing me," he replied, his voice rough from years of disuse in conversation. "But it's unusual to see anyone out here." She smiled faintly. "I understand. I've been traveling for a while and I heard about your ranch. I thought I might stop and say hello." The cowboy studied her carefully. There was something in her tone that suggested she was not merely a traveler. She had a purpose, though he did not yet know what it was. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, the silence stretching between them like the vast plains around the ranch. Then he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "Come on in if you like. The porch is large enough." She removed her hat, letting her hair fall freely around her shoulders, and stepped onto the porch. The cowboy felt a small, unexpected warmth at the sight of her. It had been decades since he had felt anything like this, a flicker of connection, of human presence that was not fleeting or imagined. They sat together on the porch, the wooden boards creaking under their weight. The wind moved through the grass around them, carrying the scent of earth and pine, and for a moment it felt as though the world outside had disappeared. The cowboy felt a nervous tension in his chest. He was unused to company, especially of this kind. "My name is Clara," the woman said, extending a hand. "I've heard stories about you, about how you've taken care of this land all these years. I wanted to meet the man behind the legend." The cowboy hesitated, then shook her hand. "I'm Tom," he said simply. "Not much of a legend, I'm afraid. Just a man who works hard and keeps to himself." Clara laughed lightly. "Well, sometimes legends live in quiet places, away from the crowds, and sometimes the quiet is where the most interesting stories are found." Tom felt a small smile tug at the corners of his lips. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to him like this, with curiosity and interest rather than pity or judgment. He found himself relaxing slightly, though still wary. He did not know this woman, and yet something about her presence felt comforting. They talked for hours that morning. Clara asked about the ranch, about the horses, and about the life Tom had built for himself. He answered cautiously at first, giving short responses, but her gentle interest encouraged him to open up more. He spoke of the land, the work, and the routines that had defined his life for decades. He did not mention the loneliness, not yet. That was a part of him he had kept hidden for 20 years, a secret that felt too fragile to share so soon. As the conversation continued, Tom noticed how observant Clara was. She did not rush him, did not interrupt, and listened carefully to every word. There was respect in her silence, a willingness to simply be present without judgment. It was something he had not experienced in a very long time. After a while, Clara stood and walked toward the fence that marked the edge of the property. She looked out over the hills, taking in the view, and sighed softly. "It's beautiful here," she said. "I can see why you stayed even all these years." Tom followed her gaze, watching the sun shimmer over the grass and the distant mountains. He felt a sudden pang of something he had almost forgotten, pride in his home, yes, but also a quiet longing for companionship. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to have someone to share these views with, to speak to laugh with. Clara turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "I know it's unusual for someone like me to come here," she said, "but I believe there are times in life when meeting the right person is worth stepping into the unknown." Tom felt his heart skip a beat. She did not know him, yet her words seemed to touch something deep inside, a part of him that had been dormant for 20 years. He wanted to speak, to ask her why she had come, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he nodded slowly, letting her know that he understood, even if he did not fully believe it yet. As the day wore on, they moved inside to the small kitchen. Clara helped him prepare a simple lunch, chopping vegetables and stirring stew in the pot. The act of cooking together was strangely comforting, a shared task that felt like the beginning of connection. Tom found himself laughing at her small jokes, smiling at her stories, and enjoying the warmth of her presence in a way he had not allowed himself to for decades. When the meal was ready, they sat at the small wooden table, eating quietly at first. Then conversation flowed more naturally. Clara asked about the horses, about the land, and about the memories Tom had of the people who had come and gone in his life. He answered slowly, carefully choosing his words, but the ease of their conversation surprised him. He had not realized how much he had missed speaking with someone who truly listened. By mid-afternoon, the sun was high in the sky, casting bright light through the windows. Tom found himself feeling something he had not felt in years: anticipation, curiosity, and a small thrill of hope. He did not understand why this woman had come into his life, or what it might mean for the future, but he knew one thing: he was glad she was here. As the day turned toward evening, Clara stood and gathered her things. "I should be on my way soon," she said softly. "But I hope I can return. There is still so much I would like to learn about this place and about you." Tom felt a pang of reluctance at the thought of her leaving. He had spent 20 years imagining life without companionship, and yet now the idea of losing her presence so soon was unexpectedly painful. He wanted to ask her to stay, but the words felt foreign on his tongue. Instead, he nodded, offering a small smile. "I'd like that," he said quietly. "You're welcome here any time." Clara smiled in return, her eyes shining with warmth. "Thank you, Tom. I think I will take you up on that." She walked to the door, waved briefly, and then turned down the trail, leaving Tom standing in the doorway. The wind moved through the grass, rustling softly, and the sun cast long shadows across the ranch. He watched her disappear into the distance, a strange mix of emotions stirring within him. Excitement, curiosity, and a flicker of something he had not felt in decades: hope. That night, Tom sat on the porch, staring up at the stars. He replayed the events of the day in his mind, thinking about the woman who had appeared out of nowhere and brought a spark of life into his quiet world. He could not explain why she had come or what it meant, but he knew one thing with certainty: his life had changed, and in ways he could not yet understand. For the first time in 20 years, the silence of the ranch felt different. It was no longer an empty, lonely place. It was a space where something new could begin, where life could surprise him once again. And as he watched the night sky, the cowboy allowed himself to imagine a future where he might not be alone after all. After that first unexpected meeting, the days on the ranch began to feel different. The cowboy, Tom, found himself thinking about Clara more often than he cared to admit. Her presence had stirred something inside him, a quiet warmth he had long buried under the years of solitude. For the first time in 2 decades, he wondered what life could be like with someone beside him, sharing not just the chores of the ranch, but the quiet moments of daily life. Clara returned the very next morning, carrying a small basket filled with fresh bread, fruits, and other simple treats. Tom felt an unfamiliar flutter in his chest when he saw her approaching along the dusty trail. He realized that in 20 years, no one had come to his door bearing kindness and companionship. Her arrival felt like sunlight breaking through clouds that had lingered over his heart for far too long. "Good morning, Tom," Clara greeted him warmly, her eyes sparkling. "I thought I might stay for a while today if that's all right." Tom hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Of course," he said. "You're welcome here any time." They spent the morning tending to the horses together. Clara moved with ease around the animals, brushing their coats, filling their water troughs, and talking softly to them. Tom watched her, noticing the gentle way she handled even the most restless horses. Her patience and understanding reminded him of a time long ago when he had believed in the kindness of others. As they worked side by side, conversation flowed naturally. Clara asked about the ranch, about the seasons, and about the small routines that had come to define Tom's life. He spoke more freely than he had in years, sharing stories of the land, the challenges he had faced, and the small victories that had kept him going. Her curiosity was genuine, and her laughter lightened the heaviness he had carried for so long. By midday, they moved to the kitchen to prepare lunch. Clara hummed softly as she worked, and the sound felt like music to Tom's ears. He found himself smiling without realizing it, the old habit of frowning at life slowly fading. They cooked together, chopping vegetables, stirring stews, and sharing stories of meals they had loved in the past. It was a simple act, yet in that simplicity there was a profound sense of connection. After lunch, they settled on the porch with cups of tea. The sun shone warmly on their faces, and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers from the hills beyond the ranch. For a while, they simply sat, listening to the quiet sounds of nature. Tom realized that he had almost forgotten how comforting it could be to share a silence with someone else, to feel that the world was not entirely empty. Clara turned to him and asked, "Have you ever thought about why you've stayed here all these years alone?" Tom paused, considering her question. "I suppose I was afraid," he admitted slowly. "Afraid of being hurt again, afraid of losing someone I care about." It's easier to be alone than to face that pain. Clara nodded gently. I understand, she said, but sometimes letting someone in is worth the risk. Life is too short to carry loneliness for so long. Her words struck a chord deep within him. For 20 years, he had convinced himself that solitude was safer, that it protected him from disappointment. Yet now, hearing her speak so kindly, he felt the walls around his heart begin to crack. Perhaps, after all this time, it was possible to take a chance. In the days that followed, Clara stayed longer with each visit. They explored the surrounding hills together, walked along the river, and watched the sun set behind the distant mountains. Tom began to notice how her presence changed the ranch itself. The air seemed lighter, the colors brighter, and even the horses responded to her warmth and gentleness. Life, once dull and predictable, began to feel vibrant and full of possibility. One afternoon, while sitting by the riverbank, Clara asked Tom about his past. You've lived here alone for so long, she said softly. Didn't you ever feel lonely? Tom looked out over the flowing water, thinking carefully before answering. I did, he admitted. For a long time I accepted it. I told myself that this was the life I was meant to live. But deep down, I always hoped for something more, even if I didn't believe it was possible. Clara smiled, reaching out to touch his hand. The gesture was light, but it carried a depth of understanding and connection that made Tom's heart race. It's never too late, she said. No matter how long you've been alone, life can still surprise you. And sometimes the surprise is exactly what we need. Tom felt a warmth spread through him, a sensation he had not experienced in decades. He realized that he was beginning to trust her, to allow himself to feel joy and anticipation once more. It was a slow process, but each day with Clara chipped away at the walls he had built around his heart. As they worked together on the ranch, their bond grew stronger. Clara learned the names and habits of each horse, helped repair fences, and even tried her hand at some of the more challenging chores. Tom found himself enjoying her company more than he had imagined possible. He laughed at her jokes, admired her determination, and appreciated her patience when tasks did not go as planned. Evenings became a time of shared reflection. They would sit on the porch, sipping tea and watching the sky change colors as the sun set. They spoke of dreams, hopes, and small plans for the future. Tom discovered that he could open up to Clara in ways he had not done with anyone else. He shared memories of his youth, stories of past adventures, and even the quiet fears that had kept him isolated for so long. Clara listened without judgment, offering gentle encouragement and understanding. Her presence made him feel safe, as though it was acceptable to be vulnerable after all these years. The connection between them grew steadily, rooted in mutual respect, kindness, and the shared experience of working together on the land. One evening, after a long day of tending to the horses and fixing a broken fence, they sat by the fire inside the small house. The flames danced in the hearth, casting warm light across the room. Tom felt a sense of peace he had not known in decades. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a life where he did not face each day alone. Clara looked at him thoughtfully. You've built something wonderful here, Tom, she said. Not just the ranch, but your life, and it's clear that even after all these years, you have a lot of love to give. Tom smiled, a mixture of gratitude and surprise on his face. I never thought I would feel like this again, he admitted. I didn't think life could change after so long, but with you here it feels possible. Clara reached out, placing her hand over his. It is possible, she said softly. You just needed someone to remind you that life doesn't end in solitude. There's still room for joy, for connection, and for love. Tom felt a tear form in his eye, quickly brushed away. He realized that her words were not just encouragement. They were a promise, a gentle invitation to embrace the life he had long denied himself. For 20 years, he had thought he was content with solitude, but now he understood that what he had truly been missing was companionship, shared laughter, and the quiet comfort of someone who cared deeply. Days turned into weeks, and their routine together became a natural part of life on the ranch. Tom discovered that he looked forward to Clara's visits, counting the hours until she arrived. They shared meals, worked on the land, and spent evenings talking by the fire. The loneliness that had defined his life for so long was slowly being replaced by warmth, trust, and connection. One morning, as they walked along the river, Clara picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. See, she said with a laugh. Even something as simple as a stone can create ripples. Small things can have a big impact. Tom watched the ripples spread across the river's surface and realized how true her words were. Clara had entered his life like a small stone, yet the effect she had was enormous. She had awakened something inside him, something he had thought was lost forever: hope. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Tom felt a sense of gratitude and wonder. Life had surprised him in a way he could never have imagined. After 20 years of solitude, after decades of believing he would never know companionship again, he was learning to trust, to open his heart, and to embrace the possibility of love. And in that quiet, golden light, Tom understood that this was only the beginning. There was still much to discover, much to share, and much to build together. The future, once empty and uncertain, now held promise. With Clara by his side, he felt ready to step into a new chapter of life, one filled with joy, connection, and the quiet magic of companionship. As the days turned into weeks, Tom and Clara's bond grew stronger with each passing moment. The ranch, once quiet and filled only with the sounds of wind and animals, now echoed with laughter, conversation, and the small joys of shared life. For the first time in 20 years, Tom felt alive in a way he had thought impossible. The years of solitude, the loneliness he had grown used to, were slowly being replaced with warmth, trust, and hope. Their mornings began together, waking to the soft light of dawn streaming through the windows. Tom would make coffee while Clara prepared breakfast. The aroma of eggs, bread, and fresh coffee filled the house, bringing a sense of comfort and familiarity that Tom had long forgotten. They ate together at the small kitchen table, sharing stories of dreams, memories, and small plans for the day ahead. The simple act of sharing a meal, once routine and solitary, had become a meaningful ritual, a symbol of their growing companionship. After breakfast, they tended to the ranch together. Clara had learned the routines quickly, and her presence made even the hardest chores more enjoyable. She fed the horses with gentle hands, repaired fences with determination, and tended the gardens with care. Tom watched her closely, admiring her dedication and patience. She brought a new energy to the ranch, a sense of life and renewal that he had never imagined. As they worked side by side, they shared stories, laughter, and sometimes quiet moments of reflection. Tom found himself opening up in ways he had not done with anyone else. He spoke of his past, the years of solitude, and the dreams he had once held. Clara listened patiently, offering comfort and understanding without judgment. Her presence gave him the courage to face his fears, to embrace the possibility of love, and to accept that life could still bring unexpected joy. Evenings became a time of quiet reflection and shared companionship. They would sit on the porch together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and purple. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers, and the sound of the river nearby added a soothing rhythm to the night. These moments, simple yet profound, allowed Tom to feel a sense of peace he had never known. For the first time in decades, he felt that he belonged, that his life had meaning beyond survival. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of the fence near the river, Clara paused and looked at Tom thoughtfully. "You've built something incredible here," she said softly. "Not just the ranch, but a life full of dedication and care. And now it feels like it's ready for something more." Tom smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "I never thought I would see this day," he admitted. "I thought life would always be like it was, quiet, predictable, and lonely, but with you here, it's different." "Everything feels brighter." Clara reached out and gently touched his hand. "It's because life is meant to be shared," she said. "Even the smallest joys are better when someone is there to share them, and I think we're ready to share them with each other." The realization hit Tom with a mixture of joy and wonder. After 20 years of solitude, he had allowed himself to hope again, to dream again, and to open his heart to the possibility of love. Clara's presence had shown him that life could be full of surprises, and that happiness could arrive even in the most unexpected ways. As the weeks continued, their days were filled with shared adventures and quiet contentment. They explored the surrounding hills, walked along the river, and discovered hidden spots on the ranch that Tom had never paid much attention to before. Clara's curiosity and appreciation for the land reminded him of the beauty that had always been there, waiting to be noticed. Together they created new memories, each moment adding to the tapestry of their shared life. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat by the fire inside the small house. The flames cast a warm glow across the room, and the shadows danced on the walls. Tom looked at Clara, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and love. "I never thought I would feel like this again," he said quietly. "I didn't think life could change after all these years, but with you everything feels possible." Clara smiled, her eyes shining with affection. "I feel the same way," she said. "It's like we found each other at just the right time, and now we get to build something beautiful together." As the seasons changed, their relationship deepened. They celebrated small victories, like a new foal born on the ranch or a garden thriving under Clara's care. They supported each other through challenges, whether it was a sudden storm or a broken fence, facing each difficulty as a team. Their companionship became the heart of the ranch, bringing life, laughter, and hope to every corner of their home. Tom often reflected on the years of solitude he had endured. He realized that those years had shaped him, taught him patience, resilience, and the value of hard work. But he also understood that he had been missing something essential, the joy of sharing life with someone who cares deeply. Clara had shown him that even after decades of isolation, it was never too late to find love, connection, and happiness. One crisp morning, as they walked along the river, Clara picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. "See," she said with a laugh. "Even something as simple as a stone can create ripples. Small things can have a big impact." Tom watched the ripples spread across the river's surface and realized how true her words were. Clara had entered his life like a small stone, yet the effect she had was enormous. She had awakened something inside him, something he had thought was lost forever: hope, love, and the courage to embrace life fully. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Tom took Clara's hand in his. "I want us to keep building this life together," he said. "I don't want to spend another day without you by my side." Clara squeezed his hand gently. "Neither do I," she replied. "We have all the time in the world now, and we get to fill it with happiness, love, and all the little moments that make life special." From that day on, their bond was unbreakable. They worked together, laughed together, and supported each other through every challenge. The ranch, once quiet and lonely, became a place of life, joy, and shared purpose. Friends from nearby towns would visit, drawn by the warmth and kindness that radiated from their home. But most of all, Tom and Clara found in each other a partner, a companion, and a love that had been worth waiting for. Tom often marveled at how life had surprised him. After 20 years of solitude, he had believed that happiness and love were beyond his reach. Yet, in the most unexpected way, Clara had arrived, bringing light, laughter, and the promise of a future filled with companionship. He realized that the years of waiting had not been wasted. They had prepared him to truly appreciate the gift of love when it finally arrived. Evenings on the porch became their favorite time of day. They would sit together, watching the stars appear one by one, talking softly about dreams, plans, and memories. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth, and the world felt alive with possibility. Tom felt a sense of peace and contentment he had never known. For the first time, he believed that life could be full of happiness, even after decades of solitude. One night, as they watched the moon rise over the hills, Tom reflected on his journey. The years of isolation had taught him strength, resilience, and patience, but it was Clara's arrival that had truly changed his life. She had shown him that love could arrive at any time, that hope could bloom even in the most unexpected places, and that life was meant to be shared. He turned to her, taking her hand in his once more. "Thank you," he whispered, "for coming into my life, for bringing joy back to this old ranch, and for showing me that it's never too late to find happiness." Clara smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "And thank you," she replied, "for opening your heart, for sharing your life, and for letting me be a part of it. Together, we've created something beautiful, a life full of love, laughter, and hope." From that day forward, Tom and Clara's life was a story of companionship, resilience, and joy. The ranch thrived under their care, the animals were happy and well-tended, and the home was filled with laughter and warmth. The years of solitude were behind them, replaced by a life that celebrated connection, shared dreams, and the quiet magic of everyday moments. They learned that love is not bound by time, that hope can return even after decades of waiting, and that life can surprise us in the most wonderful ways. Together, they embraced each day with gratitude, joy, and a deep appreciation for the gift of companionship. The cowboy who had once believed he would die alone now knew that happiness, love, and connection could bloom at any stage of life, sometimes when least expected, but always when it mattered most. And so, under the vast skies, with the land stretching endlessly around them, Tom and Clara began a new chapter of their lives. A chapter filled with laughter, love, and the quiet certainty that even after 20 years of solitude, life could bring the most extraordinary surprises. Hand in hand, they faced the future together, ready to share all the joys, challenges, and wonders that lay ahead.